Welcome to the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show. Here's your host, Brien Hanley.
Hey, everybody. What's going on? This is your man, Big B, Brien Hanley. Welcome back to Big 12 Insiders. Today, one of our spotlight games of the week. KU travels to K-State. In-state rivalry. I don't necessarily like the Sunflower Showdown. I don't necessarily like that name. But in-state rivalry, big game for both squads. We got our man Michael Swain here who covers KU for 24/7 Sports. He's going to be joining us to talk the KU side of this big rivalry. So before we get into that, remember, like, follow, subscribe, and continue to hit the notification bell to let you know when all Big 12 Insiders content comes out. But first things first, Mr. Swain, man, it's been a minute. How are you doing, my man?
Doing great. Just like we were talking about before we jumped on. It's that busy time of year now. You got some football going on. Basketball season is right around the corner. KU plays Arkansas this Friday night in one of those charity exhibitions. So we are fully in the busy season for guys like myself. But it's great to have kind of everything going on. You can dip your toe into whatever you want each day, and it makes a really fun time of year. So It's definitely busy, but it's been fun.
Yeah. I love these kind of new charity exhibition games, man, that keep going around the country. Those are fun. Those are a lot of fun. And again, KU, Arkansas, both teams are going to be really good. I mean, and you can't tell me that those coaches, they're going to play a lot of guys, but they're going to want to win this game. That's what I think is funny, is that they want to win this game. They don't want to lose. So it'll be interesting. Let's dive into this KU football season. Obviously, it hasn't gone the way that myself, probably yourself, most college football fans in general thought KU was going to have a better season. Just a quick, what has happened with the season up to this point?
Yeah, I think it's been a very disjointed season for KU so far. There have been good moments for the offense, good moments for the defense, but generally, right, KU's just not played consistent football throughout the course of a game. And you guys see it. You know, if you're watching the Big 12 every weekend, every game is a one-score game, and you have to be good at the end of halves and in high leverage moments. And KU just really hasn't done that this year. You know, you go back to the early part of the year, you can look at KU's road game at Illinois. You know, the defense does a great job all game. They can't get a stop when it matters late in the game.
Right.
Jalen Daniels throws 3 interceptions, had his worst game as a KU football player. Mm-hmm. And then it carries into the next week against UNLV where, you know, Jalen throws 2 interceptions and the defense once again can't get a stop at the end of a game. And so this kind of theme has carried on this year where the defense consistently can be solid through parts of a game. But then at the end of a first half, at the end of a game, they just can't get the stop when it really matters. And KU's allowed a little bit over 7 points per game in the final 2 minutes of halves against FBS teams this year. You can't give away free points at the end of a half. That's a guaranteed way to make sure, A, a game stays a one-score game, and right, B, how you lose in the end. So for KU, that's been a huge issue all year. The offense early in the year didn't look great, but look, since Big 12 play started, KU's averaging 6.2 yards per play, which is, I think, number 2 in the Big 12. Mm-hmm. Like, the offense has figured some things out, and Jalen has progressively looked better week over week. And so now you go into the Sunflower Showdown, and this is the best I think the offense has looked all year. The defense is coming off of a solid game against a terrible offense. Right. And that for me is going to be a big question. But big picture, you know, Brien, I think for KU this year, it's going to come down to moments. And I think the first half of the season, those moments, like 90% of them, I'd say, did not go KU's way. Right. And I think there's got to be something closer to 50-50 in those moments. And with how good KU is, and make no mistake about it, this is still a good KU team. They just have been really bad in some of those key moments. If they can flip some of those, this is a team that can put together some wins, but you're also projecting here and saying, ifs and buts and maybes. But so far, KU's not been good enough, and their record shows it.
Yeah, that's kind of the way, like I said, watching the Big 12 games all season and watching KU all season, that's kind of the way I see it. It's just what you said. Big moments, just somehow can't get over the hump. Yeah. And it was 5 weeks in a row. KU was in every game. They had a lead in the fourth quarter and just couldn't finish off the deal. But you're right. Sometimes first they had a bye week, and then they kind of get a get-right game, if so to speak, against Houston to maybe reset here and try to get some things figured out. Because look, Kansas is ultra talented. There's just no question about that. People that kind of try to question their talent, it's just you don't know what you're talking about. KU's got a ton of talent. Their coaching staff is good. Sometimes things just don't go your way. But the one thing that I will say, you beat K-State on Saturday on the road and end a 15-year drought. That kind of changes your season, doesn't it, Swain? I think it changes everything.
It does. It does. And this is something that, I've heard from plenty of KU fans about. They would take 4-8, I think, right now, if it meant one of those wins is a K-State win. Right. Because of just getting the monkey off your back. And then year over year going forward, it can be, that thing where a lot of these rivalry games are in college football. It's a coin flip. And there are streaks that happen 2, 3, 4 years. Sure. 15's a long time. Yeah. So I think this is a huge week for KU. I'm really interested to see how this team manages it because of what happened last year and really the year before, where KU could have been in the game in 2022. OJ Burrows muffs a punt. There's a coverage bust on like a 60-yard touchdown that gives K-State a 14-7 lead. Like those are two huge moments early in that game that swing it. And you look last year's game, there's the muff punt, the drop pick 6, right? Big moments. And I talked about the moments for KU, right? This season maybe not being the best. This is the type of game where they need those moments, right? You need to get those plays because K-State is so talented and you're not going to be able to beat them, I think, head up right now. And so for KU, like if they're able to win this game, I'm not going to say that they're going to go and win the rest of their games this season. They go play Iowa State at home. They got to go on the road to play BYU. And I guarantee you guys, that is going to be the 9:30 Central kick. It's going to be Provo after dark and weird stuff happens there, as K-State fans know. So I think this is a huge individual game for KU, but I feel like it's also one that might be able to set the tone for the second half of the season. And really even shoot the final home stretch because there are 4 games left and KU is a bye week after this one.
Gotcha. You mentioned it. You touched on it earlier as far as the defense. I think the defense, and although Jalen Daniels has gotten better progressively, I think the defense and Jalen Daniels both needed that Houston game to kind of, I mentioned it, get right, but just to kind of go out and have some confidence again to say, you know what, we are a pretty good football team. Now, Houston's not great. Let's not kid ourselves. It's Houston offense. I will say the Houston defense hasn't played bad all season, but the Houston offense, they can't find a quarterback. It's just a mess. But that doesn't matter sometimes. And I say this all the time, when you're the superior team, it's your job to go out and dominate a football game. KU did that. It could have been easily, this game could have been 42-35 or something of that nature, Michael Swain. And I commend KU for kind of right setting. Moving on to this game, what are some of the things? I know you touched on it a little bit as far as what KU needs to do. How do they stop this K-State rushing attack?
They pray. And they get some new linebackers. No, I think really this is going to come down to how healthy Cornell Wheeler is. Because you early in the year and you look at what KU's defense was doing, you shut down an Illinois team that now in hindsight looks a lot better than I thought they were at the time.
Correct.
At the time, I thought they were destined for 5-7, 6-6, but that's a team that just beat Michigan. They've got some good wins this year. But you look at what the defense did and how well Cornell played in that game. You go to UNLV and how much KU is able to shut down that offense that you look throughout the course of the season has been really, really good, whether it's Sluka or with their new quarterback. And even against West Virginia, for much of that game, KU was pretty solid defensively. The final 2 drives were terrible and Cornell got hurt. So it was an out there. And so for me, Cornell is such a linchpin for Kansas in this game because he's in the right spots. He is a physical player and he's got good athleticism. And those are the things you need against this K-State run game because Giddens is a physical runner. You need physicality. You got to be able to tackle effectively. There's Avery Johnson, right? He can scramble. He can go on a quarterback run. KU's really struggled to contain the quarterback run game this year. And for me, I go back to and look and say, Cornell, can you go out there? If KU's got to play 60 defensive snaps, 65 defensive snaps, Cornell, can you give us 55? You know,
Right.
if you're Chris Simpson, KU's linebackers coach, that's the conversation you're having. Because the issue is Cornell Wheeler and JB Brown form a really good linebacker tandem for KU, probably the best one they've had in a long time. The issue is when the next guy that comes in is by Pro Football Focus, the worst graded linebacker, not named Gavin Potter, at Kansas in the last decade.
Oh,
You know, that's what we're talking about here. It's a huge drop off. And so
right.
I think this linebacker room for KU is going to decide this game because, or at least the game defensively for KU, because the front seven, we know what they are. The defensive tackles are solid. The defensive ends can't really get after the quarterback. The secondary, maybe they can pick off Avery once if he makes a bad play. But it's going to come down to, can KU make K-State one-dimensional? And that comes down to the linebackers, and that's going to be such a huge piece of the puzzle for KU. And it's going to involve stopping Giddens, Dylan Edwards, and Avery. And that's a tall task.
Right. Here's my thing, and I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't say this, because I have been screaming all year for Jalen Daniels is struggling. Give Devin Neal the football. Run the football more. You're having a ton of success running the football. I even got on here one time and said, you know what? Jalen Daniels is struggling. Run it 45. Give Devin Neal the ball 45 times if you have to. Anything to go win a football game. Is that something that KU is prepared to do if Jalen Daniels is struggling? Because they haven't done that in the past, these games that they lost. They just haven't done it. I'm like, just keep giving them the ball. You're getting 5 yards every time this kid touches the football. Just keep doing it. Your quarterback is not in a good way. Now, he's playing better now. Obviously, I get all of that. But are they prepared to just say, you know what, we're going to do whatever it takes to win the game? Because in the previous games, they just haven't been able to. They just weren't willing to do that, I guess.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point. And it's something that I think was talked a lot about, you know, in people that cover the team and amongst fans. And then you look at the numbers, and every single week I would kind of go back and look at things. And in the first half of games, Devin would average 6-7 yards a carry.
Right.
And what would happen is the other teams would say, all right, screw this, enough, and go put 8 guys in the box.
Gotcha.
And then all of a sudden, the second half, Devin's averaging 3 yards a carry. And that's why I think at times, you know, fans who are vocal were like, what's going on? Why isn't Devin touching the ball? It's the fourth quarter. Devin's got to touch the ball. It's like, well, guys, like the other teams kind of decide that Devin is not going to be the difference in this game. And it's going to come down to the quarterback play. And for KU this week, this is by far the best run defense they've played all year.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a huge test, I think, for this offensive line that I think is good. I don't know if it's as good as last year's offensive line, but I think there are elements that are better. I think this is a better run blocking offensive line than last year's. Pass blocking, it's been iffy. But it's going to come down to those front five. How do you attack the way that K-State is shifting its fronts, right? Going from 3 down to 4 down, and the way that they change the angles that they attack you on. And then for Devin, can you just be special? Yeah. Right. You saw it last year. Cole Ballard, your quarterback. Devin, go be special. And that's what he was. And there's a cool element of this game as well. I think Devin needs 74 yards in this game to break the all-time rushing record at Kansas. And it would be really cool. I think K-State fans would admit this too. It'd be really cool for a Kansas kid who picked to go to KU to do it in the rivalry game.
Yeah.
Right. That'd be pretty freaking cool. And you think about the past running backs that have been at Kansas, right? Gale Sayers as being the headline, right? There have been a lot of great running backs at Kansas. And for Devin to do this in this game, I think would have some really cool meaning. And obviously, I think Devin would say, screw it. I could care less. Let's win the freaking football game. Right. But I think for KU this week, it's going to be a huge test of this run game and just how good it is.
Right. A lot of Kansas kids are going to be in this game. As somebody that played in it, I'm not from Kansas, so it didn't necessarily initially, it didn't have the meaning for me, as somebody that's from Kansas. I didn't get it. I just coming from where I come from, Louisville, Kentucky, it was, I know Kansas, I know Kansas State, but they play basketball. They don't even play football until I went to Coffeyville, and I'm like, oh, they actually do have football teams there. oh, by the way, I'm going to go to Kansas State. So it's one of those things. I just think it's really cool how they have all these kids from Kansas. I know Kansas State has a little bit more than Kansas does, but I just think it's cool how many Kansas kids are going to be playing in this football game at the Power 4 level, because let's not kid ourselves. Kansas is not known for having big-time high school football. But I would say over the last 5 years, that's changed. That has changed a little bit. I'm not saying it's on the level of Texas and Florida and all of that kind of stuff, but I think it's changed a little bit. And I just think that's a really neat element to this, to add to the rivalry, a little spice that gets involved, because, I like a rivalry. I like hostility in a rivalry. And, you get on any chat board and it's been hostile, but I'm thinking that the KU fan base is really fired up to try to win this football game.
Oh, most definitely. And on the in-state front, and real quick, I love when players trash talk. I think it's fun.
Yeah.
If you're not disrespectful, like I'm like, all right, come on now.
Right.
But a good example, right? Like I think Kobe Bryant tweeted something last year, like, oh, we can't wait to play K-State. And Avery Johnson's like, cool, can't wait either. Like that's fun. It's harmless. And it makes an extra element for this game where guys got to go back it up. I think that's cool. On the in-state front, Leipold and KU have tried. They really have made local guys a huge priority. And I think the thing they're trying to overcome right now is what the streak more shows rather than what the streak is.
Right.
And it shows how bad Kansas has been. Right. And why K-State for so long has been the place to go. And KU's trying to fight that. And you've seen it locally. They've been able to get some local guys, right? Calvin Clements from Lawrence, Jaden Ham from Eudora. And then there are great stories like Jared Casey. But in terms of the more high-profile local recruiting battles, there haven't been those wins yet. And that's why I think this game in particular, it's not going to make, Ian Premer or one of the top 2026s pick Kansas. But it's going to show that, hey, you can go to Kansas and win this game, compete at a high level, and go and win big games. And so I think for KU, this is a really big game statement-wise. Do I think KU is going to win? No, I don't. But I think generally KU is trying to make local recruiting a bigger emphasis. I think, Ryan Wallace did a great job highlighting that, right? I think 34 is the number of Kansas kids on the KU roster. I think that will grow, especially in this 2026 high school class where there are a lot more local guys who have KU offers where, they're either from kind of the, Lawrence or Ottawa area or even Wichita, if you think about someone like Jalen Mason. And so for KU, like it's just a gradual build. Rome wasn't built in a day, and overcoming a decade of absolutely sucking is really hard. And especially when these kids are the age where all they know is Kansas being terrible at football. And that's really hard to overcome. And I think that's something KU's trying to do. And I think that's why a win on Saturday for KU would probably mean so much.
Yeah. I mean, for so long, and I'll get you out of here, but for so long, the game, to me, in my opinion, and I think in a lot of people's opinion, the game has meant more to Kansas State than it has for Kansas. I think this year the tables have turned. It's not that the game doesn't mean a ton to Kansas State. I just think it means more to Kansas this year, especially how the season has gone and where Kansas is trying to go with their program and everything. I just think it means more to Kansas this year. Does it mean it's going to turn out that way? We'll see on Saturday. So I appreciate you, Mr. Michael Swain, for giving us your time. You're always gracious with us. So we will bring you back as many times as we need to, man. So, again, I want to thank you.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks for having me on. I always enjoy it.
All right. Thank you. We will be back on the other side of this to talk on the Kansas State side of this big rivalry between Kansas and Kansas State.
Welcome back to the show. Let's head back to the studio.
All right. On the other side of this great Kansas rivalry, again, I don't like saying the Sunflower Showdown. I don't like that name. But on the other side of this rivalry, we got Tim Fitzgerald talking the K-State side. First things first, Fitz, how are you doing today, my man?
I'm good. We've got Mr. Ryan Gilbert at Big 12 Media Day, so I thought I'd sit in for him. It's a busy week.
Yes, it is. Very busy week. I talked to several publishers, and they're all saying the same thing. This time of year It's just you dab your toe in one, and as soon as you take it out, you got to put your foot in the other. It's super, super busy.
Yep.
So this rivalry, we just talked to Michael Swain, and we talked a little bit about, the meaning of this game. And I'll start there first. Is a lot of times, Fitz, over the course of the years, I think this game meant more to Kansas State than it did to Kansas. And I think, the proof is in the pudding, especially over the last 30 years. But this year seems different. It seems like this game actually means, just with the circumstances and everything going on, it means more to Kansas. Now, I'm not saying that it's not a big deal to K-State. I am not saying that at all, because I believe that it is. But Kansas is looking at this as, we can spoil their season.
Yep.
We can try to continue and make our season something with this victory. So the tables have kind of turned when you talk in those aspects.
I agree. And Lance Leipold's made this game more valuable to the Kansas program. Even though he hasn't won yet, he's been really competitive for a couple of years now. In fact, I think we all agree KU probably should have won last year, and K-State found a way to do it. So this has been a case of K-State simply having many more Kansas players on its roster. And that still exists, but you can tell they're now getting some really quality players out of the state of Kansas over in Lawrence. And I think that kind of closes things up too, when you got a guy like, Devin Neal standing up in the locker room and saying how important this game is to him. It kind of brings around what has happened at K-State quite often. But Lance Leipold has found a way to prepare his team and his program for this game in a way that nobody really has since Mark Mangino.
Right. And for me, and we talked about this yesterday on a different podcast, and I talked about Michael Swain. It's like, from the outside looking in, I was a guy that went to Kansas State, but the rivalry didn't mean anything to me initially, because I really didn't know that there was a rivalry. I knew the two teams or the two schools because they played basketball. Until I went to Coffeyville, I didn't even really pay attention to either one of them in football. But turns out they had football programs. Yep. Imagine that. And K-State had a really good one, which is why I went there. But I think it means a lot. The title, it turned because of the Kansas kids in our locker room at the time.
Yeah.
And the tides changed again to making it into a bigger rivalry. Like you mentioned, the number of Kansas kids that are on K-State's roster, more than Kansas. Kansas still has its fair share. And I think it's because now you look at, the quality of the teams are really good. That means that the quality of high school football in Kansas is better, Fitz. Look, I'm not going to confuse them. And I said this to Swain too. I'm not confusing Kansas with Texas or Florida or California or anything like that. But you can't tell me that the quality of high school football in Kansas hasn't gotten a ton better for the number of kids that are on each teams and how good those teams are now. It has to be better. It just has to be.
I don't think even doing it per capita, Kansas would even measure up against Texas and Florida, because those are year-round sports there.
Right.
And Kansas high school has always emphasized multi-sport athletes, which has worked well for Kansas State because they like multi-sport athletes.
Correct.
And particularly, those wrestlers who become linemen, but Ben Sinnott was a hockey player, and they just see it as a way to prove your overall athletic ability and a good measurement. And that's also part of the reason why when you see Kansas kids quite often come into programs, it takes them a little bit longer to acclimate to the college football level, because they've been multi-sport training and now they're locking in on just one sport and trying to close the gap on the players that were recruited out of those hotbeds like Florida and Texas.
Absolutely. Let's shift focus to this actual game as far as the schematics of it. What does K-State have to do to try to win this football game?
Just establish that run. I mean, if they get DJ Giddens going at the rate he has been prior to West Virginia, it's going to be extremely difficult for Kansas to manage this game. Again, you know how it works. If you're losing the line of scrimmage, you're losing the game. Mm-hmm. Typically, we saw that almost get overturned at Colorado because Shedeur Sanders was so good. They lost the line of scrimmage and still almost won. But it takes that kind of extraordinary effort to overcome losing the line of scrimmage. And if K-State establishes their will, it's going to be difficult. But we saw West Virginia remove DJ Giddens for the most part from the game plan, and Avery Johnson just went to the air. And so that's made K-State even a little bit more terrifying, as now they really are multifaceted.
And I mentioned this too, Avery Johnson, obviously after he got hurt at Colorado, he didn't run anymore in that game. He didn't run last week at all. And I think both were by design. Obviously in Colorado, he couldn't run the football. Against West Virginia, they didn't need him, but they also protected him, to try to heal up and try to win a game without using him. I don't think that's going to be the case in this game because from all indications, number one, he's better. Number two, and when I say better, he's
healthier
or healing. He's more healthy. But number two, this game means a lot to Avery Johnson being from Kansas.
It does. It really does. There's some feelings there, and as are with a lot of kids in those locker room. Back in the day, it included guys like Jordy Nelson who weren't recruited by Kansas at all and walked on at Kansas State, so they kind of held that around. But Avery's just a really special player when he's dual threat, and he'll be back to dual threat, we expect, this week. He didn't get tackled the entire West Virginia game. K-State did such a good job of protecting a guy who threw the ball 29 times. So he should be really healthy coming into this game. I think he feels good. And I know this game does mean a lot to him, and I'm sure that is being communicated through the K-State locker room.
So Kansas last week, they get off the snide. They'd lost 5 in a row. Defense they gave up 5 leads in the fourth quarter. They've been in every single game that they have been in, but they just haven't been able to close the deal for whatever. Jalen Daniels played well last week. He has been getting progressively better as the season has gone on. Now, people are going to look at, well, Houston's not any good, but you got to look a little deeper than that. Houston's defense is actually pretty good. Their offense is a totally different story.
Yeah.
And you could look at that game their defense was on the field forever because they threw 4 interceptions. And, anytime you throw 4 interceptions, it's a problem.
Yeah.
But Kansas capitalized. They scored 42 points. They held Houston to 14. So saying all of that, it looks like maybe that was a get-right game for them. Yeah. I don't think Kansas State fans should just think that this is going to be a walk in a park. I think this game is going to be nip and tuck because, as we've mentioned all year, and I have finally been right, I've been saying Kansas is finally going to get over the hump. Well, they did. But Kansas is good, man. They're talented. They're really talented.
They are. This is the same team we thought would be contending for the Big 12 title. They just kind of lost their closing efforts. They couldn't win a game in the final minutes. The defense couldn't stop anyone, and the offense couldn't quite outscore anyone, and to the point where the defense couldn't screw it up until the Houston game. Off week, get right game against Houston, head to your rivalry game. It couldn't have worked out better in terms of recovery for University of Kansas. And I've been warning people the whole time. This Kansas team is going to eventually look like the Kansas team we expected. It's taken them some time with the new offensive coordinator. I think they kind of lost their identity for a little bit. They're recovering that. And I expect them to be incredibly motivated to come into this game. Not only are they talented, but now they can say, look, this can salvage something out of this season and actually put us in a position to continue to win and get bowl eligible and make it look much better than it was looking, even though it falls short of expectations. This is an opportunity for Kansas to make a really big statement and end a long losing streak to their rival in a season that hasn't gone so well.
Yeah, and that would be, I would guess, Kansas's number one focus is to wreck Kansas State's season. Kansas State, on the other side, hey, we keep winning and we win out, we're going to be in the college football playoff. And that's why this game is so important. I mean, you can look at the records, and I know it's a cliche to say, throw out the records in a rivalry. Well, you really can in this one because they're playing for 2 different things. Kansas trying to get bowl eligible, wreck their rival season. Kansas State, hey, everything that we want is literally in front of us, and we got to go beat a really talented team, but we happen to be able to do that at home. That's why I'm so intrigued by this matchup. Another thing that got brought up, Devin Neal, and depending on who you talk to, Some say it's 71 yards. Some others say it's 74 yards. So I don't know the exact truth. But from breaking the Kansas all-time rushing record, you look at some of the running backs Kansas have had, that maybe it was a long time ago, but the list is pretty good. And for him to be able to do that and to be a Kansas kid, first off, is K-State, do they know about that? Or their run defense is really, really good. I'm sure they're pretty motivated to not let that happen on their home field.
Yeah, I would think so if they even know or care. But they haven't had many running backs do that kind of damage this year. So I think they're probably approaching this, if we just play our game, and maybe they're also hoping maybe KU gets a little distracted by that, and tries to run it a little more than they should. I wouldn't think so, but you just never know. Rivalry games cause a little weirdness sometimes. But yeah, K-State's defense has been extremely good against the run, far better than I thought it would be, Brian. I didn't expect it from this group, but they have done a great job just containing the run. They had some problems with the quarterback run game, which brings Daniels to the forefront. But I think this defense, if it just does its thing, he won't be breaking that record in Manhattan, but he's a whale of a running back. Boy, is he good.
Yeah, he's very good. A lot of things to worry about there, but Kansas State got a lot of things to worry about too. Just going off of last week, Fitz, just looking at, what they were able to do throwing the football when a team just said, we're not going to let you run it. We're going to put so many resources up here that we're just not going to let you run it. I mean, they were blitzing. West Virginia was blitzing cornerbacks, for crying out loud, just to say, you're not running the football. Well, K-State just said, okay, fine. We're not going to do anything special. We're not going to run any trick plays. We're just going to throw the ball over your head. And they did. And they were able to do that. We're just going to keep throwing it over your head. And eventually, maybe you'll back up. Maybe you won't. West Virginia really didn't do that until late in the game. And in K-State, okay, great. Well, now we'll run the ball on you. There's just so many ways that they can hurt this Kansas defense, which hasn't necessarily – they've been good. And then all of a sudden, they're not good. For them to be able to stop this Kansas State rushing attack, it's going to be very, very difficult.
Well, the strength of this KU defense is on its back end.
Correct.
And they feel like they can maybe contain K-State's receivers, even if they commit resources to the run. I think that's going to be kind of the flex point of this game. If they do that and kind of go man on the outside, can Avery Johnson and his receivers make KU secondary pay like they did against Colorado and eventually against West Virginia? They just kind of nickeled and dimed West Virginia for much of the game, and then they started hitting deep. And it's going to be interesting. You got to pick your poison, and if you're a defense coordinator, you're still saying maybe that was a fluke with Avery Johnson. DJ Giddens has proven over a number of years now. Let's go ahead and take our chances with Avery Johnson. And Big B, I don't think that's wise, because also if you bring all that pressure and you don't get Avery, now you've exposed yourself to the quarterback run, which West Virginia didn't face last week. So there's just some layers here that KU better be concerned about.
All right. Well, look, I'm looking forward to the game. I think it's going to be an outstanding football game. Again, two teams that are trying to win for different reasons. One's trying to salvage a season and wreck their rival season. Another one is saying everything that we wanted to accomplish this year is out in front of us. We just have to continue to win, and beating our rival is another opportunity to do so. So I appreciate you giving us the time today, Fitz, as you always do. We'll be back again with more Big 12 insiders down the road. Our game day is coming out tomorrow. And then me and Fitz will be back on Friday, talking the week of the Big 12. So make sure you guys stick around. Remember to like, follow, subscribe, all of that good stuff. We appreciate everybody, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you for watching the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show. This has been a Spirit Street production.